going to start with the introduction to butterflies, and probably with the ones that you'll most commonly see, and then we'll work our way down to the sort of rarer species, which a lot of them are in Fermanagh, so that's good. And then we're going to have a little break for questions, and then I'll start another presentation, which is how you can help butterflies and you create habitats for butterflies, which is absolutely my passion in life, is creating habitat for butterflies. So I'm really looking forward to delivering that to you as well. So I'm not going to talk about myself because there's much more interesting things to talk about, and we'll make a start. And please do pop your questions in the chat at the end. So butterflies, they are part of the family Lepidoptera, which means scaly wings. And you can see from this photograph that their wings are made up of these tiny little scales. 17,500 species worldwide, and Northern Ireland supports 25 species of butterflies. And we have another couple of migrants that we see from time to time in there as well, but infrequently. Their butterfly feeding habits: they get most of their food from plants, the adults drink nectar for energy, and the larvae feed on plants. So one of my sort of soundboards is to always reassure and insist upon people providing caterpillar food plants, sorry. So you can provide all the nectar supply in the world in your gardens and outside in your community spaces, but you have to have the caterpillar food plant there as well so that the butterflies can complete their last cycle. And they sometimes supplement their diet with minerals from human sweat, animal waste, mud, dead animals, and rotting fruit. And if you've got a big apple tree in the garden and there's windfalls on at the end of the summer, you'll see red admirals feeding on the apples. That's quite a common sight, and it's a nice way to attract red admirals into the garden. So just a quick demonstration of the life cycle with the orange tip. Adults mate, they lay an egg. So this is the orange tip egg here on cuckoo flower or lady's smock. It's quite unusual to see 3 eggs actually on the flowers because the caterpillars are cannibalistic. So the first caterpillar that comes out will eat everything else, be it an egg or a caterpillar. But they're very conspicuous. So you can see them quite easily on cuckoo flower if you look for them well, we've missed the season now, but earlier in the year, you can see these very easily. The caterpillar emerges, and this is the eating stage of the butterfly's life cycle. So this is where it does all of its growth and development. And that's why those caterpillar food plants are absolutely essential when you're providing for butterflies. And then it forms its chrysalis. You can see here, this chrysalis is formed in summer, and it's green in order to match the green foliage so it can stay camouflaged. And the orange tip actually overwinters as a chrysalis. So eventually its chrysalis turns brown as we go into autumn so that it can remain camouflaged against the brown stems of the plant. And then in spring, they emerge and the adults mate and the cycle is completed. Some butterflies hibernate as adults. The small tortoiseshell and the peacock do this. If we get a lot of inquiries around sort of September, October, people saying there's a butterfly in my house, what should I do? And if you just pop it somewhere cool, shed, and remember to open the door in spring, everything should be okay. They'll pop out when the temperatures increase. If you leave it in the house, when you start putting your central heating on, it'll wake them up and they'll start fluttering around. So it's nice to have them in the house, but you may as well move them on. And they'll come out and they'll mate and lay eggs in the following spring. A small tortoiseshell is one that is frequently seen in people's houses. We get regular migrations of painted lady and red admirals. We had a massive painted lady year a couple of years ago, 2019. People were seeing them all over the place. They migrate in order to follow their food plant, so they have a resource of their food plant, and also to avoid the parasitic wasps that lay their eggs inside the caterpillars. They can't survive the winter here, but the painted lady can do a journey, a 9,000-mile journey from Africa to Arctic Circle. Well, that's not one butterfly, that's several generations of adults emerging, mating, laying eggs, and offspring then completing another generation and so on. So it's like a relay race. In 2009, sorry, there was 11 million painted ladies came in to the UK and 26 million left. So we have these huge painted ladies years about every 10 years. So getting to know the species in Northern Ireland. Some of the species are widespread and some of them more specialist, and we're starting with the widespread species. So you can have a little think to yourself if you recognise either of these. I'm going to pop up the names in a second, but I'm giving you a couple of seconds thinking time if you recognise any of these species and want to test yourself. So here we have the small tortoiseshell, and the second one is peacock. Small tortoiseshell hibernates, and it can be seen from very early spring. It is one of the first records to come in to our database in spring. Small tortoiseshells coming out of hibernation. You see them in gardens, parks, urban areas. They're very common in our daily lives, and the food plant is a nettle. Peacock, again, hibernates early spring to autumn and comes to gardens and is really characterful butterfly and quite easily recognised by these blue eye spots, which are like a peacock. The small tortoiseshell has this blue border. The painted lady, I'll show you in a minute, really looks like the small tortoiseshell, but you just have to look for the blue border. None of the other butterflies of this type have that blue border. So here we have 2 more species, ones that we would see quite commonly. I'll give you a couple of seconds thinking time before I put up the names. Red Admiral and painted lady. So we've talked about the painted lady, that's a migrant, and the Red Admiral is also a migrant, but they come every year. They use all habitats. The food plant is a nettle. There has been some recent evidence of overwintering in the south of the UK, which is possibly linked to climate change. They are very powerful, I think, as a butterfly. And when you see them in flight, they look really black, but their markings are so bold. I find them very easy to identify, but some people do mix them up with the small tortoiseshell. So again, just look for that blue border. This has no blue border. It's got these strong red markings, the Red Admiral. And the painted lady, you just have to get to know it. So I don't have a good tip for the painted lady. It does look very like the small tortoiseshell, but again, look for these blue border. It doesn't have a blue border. So it's a long distance migrant, as we've discussed, and it comes to gardens and parks, and its food plant is the thistle. Now the whites are tricky. Oh, hang on, something's popped up there. Let's get rid of that. Give you a second to work that one out. It does what it says on the tin. And this one does as well to a degree. This is the orange tip, and this is the green veined white. The orange tip's a spring butterfly. It's pretty much the harbinger of spring. It's one of the first ones that we see in April. You see them in garden and hedgerows. The food plant is the cuckoo flower or the lady's smock, but also garlic mustard. This is like a hedgerow plant. It's quite tall and has like a white flower head on the top. Only the males have these orange tips, but I'll give you a little ID tip for the females as well in a second. The green veined white has these green veins in its underwing, and you need to see a lot of the whites at rest in order to be able to identify them. They're not easy. You know, it took me a while to get my head around the whites, but that's the orange tip and the green veined white. The green veined white again is from early spring onwards, and it comes to gardens, parks, a lot of different habitats. Its food plant is crucifers. That's like wild mustards and cresses. It doesn't eat your cabbages, so you can relax about the green veined white. A rule of thumb is if you're seeing a white butterfly, it's probably a green veined white, because they are quite common. The orange tip, both male and female, have this mottledy patternation in their underwing. So again, if you were seeing these out in the field, you would be able to identify this very quickly because both the males and the females have that. So always try and see your whites when they're at rest. Okay, I'll give you a second to see if you can work out what these might be. I've given you a little bit of a a hint with the size, although actually in the field we can't go off size. So it's just a hint for the purpose of the photos. So here we have small white, and this one is the large white. And these are really difficult. I found it took me ages to get my head around these. And you can't go off size because there's some large, small whites, and then there's some smaller, large whites. So size is out. You can't go off spots because they have different spots, male or female, etc. So the very best thing to do for small white is to have a look at the wingtips. So you see here on the small white, it's a very insignificant coloration on the wingtip. It's quite faded, it's quite insignificant. So my aid memoir is it's small, it's insignificant, it's faded, it's small white. And the large white has got a big, bold marking on its wingtip there. So I think to myself, big, bold, large, strong, it's the large white. That's how I help myself remember. They come from spring to autumn. They do eat your cabbages, I'm afraid. They come to gardens and allotments and crop fields. So if you have kale plantations, there's cattle fodder near you, you might find you get a lot of small and large whites in those. They're known together as the cabbage whites. So quite a lot of people recognise them together as those butterflies. And what I do, I grow cabbages. So I also grow a lot of nasturtium because they will eat nasturtium. And I also will give them my rubbish cabbage plants. So I choose the best cabbage plants I have, I grow those for the family, and then I put out all the other ones that don't look like they're going to do very well, plant those up for the butterflies, and I pop a little net over my cabbages. So we can manage our food production without using chemicals or picking off the caterpillars. We can provide for them as well. So this is our special white species. I'll give you a little second to see if you can remind yourself what that one is. It's the cryptic wood white. Mm. Yeah, the cryptic wood white is a very beautiful butterfly. It was discovered in 2001 to be different to the wood white. It had been previously called the Rachael's wood white. They thought it was a European wood white, but actually genetic identification found it to be completely different again, and it's only found in Northern Ireland in the UK. It is widespread across Ireland, except in the Burren, where they have the wood white. That's all a bit complicated to realise. But this little butterfly is really beautiful, and it flies like a little fairy. It looks, when you first see them, I think they're quite difficult to identify, because to me, that's quite veiny. So when I first started out, I thought, no, is that a green veined white? Because it's quite veiny under there. But you can tell by the shape of the wings, they're very rounded, and it has this nice long wing shape. And they also fly like little fairies. They have this kind of flappy, slow, lazy, flappy flight. They really do this. They fly like a lapwing. And when you see them in the field, you really recognise that they're different. You think, oh, that's not recognisable. So when you see them for the first time, you'll know. And then you can just get a close look at them. They like open, rough areas of grassland, and their food plant is meadow vetchling and bird's foot trefoil. And their season is just coming to an end now. So you might catch a few struggling adults, but with pretty much the adult season is over now. That's meadow vetchling, which is one of their food plants, and that's the bird's foot trefoil. And this is a plant which is very regularly found in our verges. And if allowed to grow, it would be in quite a lot of our public spaces as well, such as our parks and some, community grasslands, maybe in schools and things like that. This is the reason why we shouldn't be spraying or mowing verges, and that we should, protect our verges as much as possible. They very rarely sit like this. This is a mating pair, but I've put this on just so in case you got one in a net, you could see the difference between this and the large and small white. It doesn't have a sort of a boomerang style wingtip. It's got almost a square dot on its wingtip. That's the male. That's about the strongest that gets. The female does have it, but it's very, very pale. So if you're struggling to ID from the flight and from the shape of the wings, you can try and get one in a net and have a look and see if it's got those wing spots there. Okay, so moving on to the browns. So this brown one is another one that pretty much does what it says on the tin. It likes woods and it's quite speckledy. So hopefully that'll give you a hint as it's to its name. It's the speckled wood. And this one is has lots of rings on it. You see these rings? And again, that is a hint to its name. It's the ringlet. The speckled wood comes from late spring onwards. They like woodlands, gardens, hedgerows. It's one of the butterflies you'd see if you were out on a local walk, going along your roads and enjoying the hedgerows. Its food plant is grasses, and it can have several generations in a year. So the adults can emerge, mate, lay eggs, and then go through the life cycle and do that again 2 or 3 times in a year, potentially depending upon the weather. Just at this stage, I'm going to explain to you that sometimes butterfly folk say broods. So they'll say there'll be 2 broods in a year. And if you're a birding person, you'll know that a brood, when you're a bird, is the same pair going again. Okay. And that's not the case with butterflies. What we're referring to there is actually generations and not the same, not the same female laying again in a month or so. The ringlet is a summer butterfly. It's really plain looking, but I'm really fond of this butterfly because you get them in sort of, not particularly species rich, but grown grasslands. And you walk through a field of that and you get lots of ringlets emerging out of the grasses, and they're nice to see. It's a nice little butterfly. And if you're seeing it at rest, you can really identify it with those rings on its underwing there. You see the little ring eye spots. Okay, this is another one of our browns. It's brown and it tends to be found in meadows. So this is a little hint as to its name. It's the meadow brown. It's a late summer butterfly. It's the larger of the browns. The ringlet's actually on the smaller side. This one is the larger of the browns, and it likes grasslands as well. And its food plant is grasses also. So if you think about the browns, they like the brown grasses. They like the brown sort of, not intensely green, rich fields for agriculture, but the brown fields of sort of areas that haven't been improved. That's where you'll find these species. Now, a common mistake is for beginners is to get your butterfly book and head out and start trying to identify things. And you might not be aware even that there's butterflies in the UK that don't occur here, because you're just starting out and it's all entirely new. And when we do our fact sheets and ID sheets and someone's downloaded one off our site, you might get this butterfly on it. And we get quite a few records, incorrect records every year of this butterfly. Oops. Which is the gatekeeper. You can see it is very similar to the meadow brown, especially the female meadow brown, which when freshly emerged can be very orange. And some individuals, again, just through natural variation, can be very orange. So we get a lot of people thinking, oh, it can't be a meadow brown. It's really orange, but it is, because we don't have the meadow brown, the gatekeeper in Northern Ireland. Okay, so moving on to the blues. You can see that these 2 butterflies look very similar at first glance. I'll give you a second to think about our 2 blues. Well, we've got 3, but I'll talk about the other one later. So here we have the common blue, and here we have the holly blue. The common blue is a butterfly of late May onwards. It uses meadows, dunes, brownfield sites, waste ground. Really good site outside Belfast for the common blue, for example, is down at the docks. There's lots of concreted, abandoned ground there, and wildflowers have come in, habitat has succeeded, and this is an excellent place. It's warm, it's sheltered, and it's got lots of the food plant bird's foot trefoil. If you entered a a place where there might be holly blue and common blue in the same habitat or environment, the common blues fly quite close to the ground. They don't sort of venture very high up from the top of the grasses. Whereas the holly blue is a sort of a tree loving butterfly. It also, the first generation appears quite early. So if you're seeing a blue butterfly sort of early April, it's not going to be a common blue, it's going to be a holly blue. So there's a generation in early April and there's one in late summer. And they like gardens, parks, woodland rides and hedgerows. Their food plant is holly and ivy. And the first generation feeds on holly and the second generation feeds on ivy. So it's very cleverly timed its two brood emergence to coincide with the food plants that it can avail of. It just shows the delicate evolution of the butterflies with the food plants that they need. The female common blue is quite interestingly coloured, which can sometimes be brown, these brown tips, and she always has these orange spots, okay? And if you want to determine whether you're looking at a holly blue or a common blue for certain, then try and see it at rest. The common blue, male and female, have these rich patinations on the underwing, and you can see they always have these orange dots along the border. And the holly blue does not. So the holly blue has none of this brown or orange patination colouring and just has a few specks. And it's a very dainty little butterfly. You know you're seeing something special when you see a holly blue. I think so anyway. It's tiny, they're quite captivating, they capture your attention, they flit about. And because they're a tree-loving species, you know, they're not flying above the grasses, they're up in trees. They'll sometimes come down onto the ground to have a little bask, then into the trees again. They like to nectar on bramble, actually. So if you have a woodland ride with bramble and surrounded by their food plant, holly and ivy, you probably get a good chance of seeing. Okay, so these, I've called these our gems because these are my two favourite butterflies in Northern Ireland. They almost do what they say. There's this one can quite have a little streak, a hairline streak of white hair, and it's green, and that would be known as the green hairstreak. And this one is copper coloured, and it's small, and it's a small copper. And I love these two butterflies. The green hairstreak is an early spring to summer species. It likes heathland, moorland, and its food plant is gorse and bilberry. They're quite hard to find. They are superbly camouflaged against birch trees where they like to rest. But if on a sunny day in the right kind of habitat, you go along maybe the edge of a bog or something like that, edge of a heath where there's birch trees, and give them a little shake, you can disturb the green hairstreak from them, and that's a nice way of seeing them. They're really beautiful metallic colours. Small copper, this is a late spring to autumn butterfly. It likes dunes, it likes grasslands, it likes waste ground. It's fairly easygoing in terms of habitat. You can find it anywhere, but you only ever see them in ones or twos. I've actually never seen more than two small copper at a time, excuse me. And again, like the holly blue, these butterflies are really captivating. They capture your attention. They're very small and bright, and you're sort of amazed at how small they are, and you'll be chasing it across an area trying to capture it on your camera, and it'll be evading you. So they're really nice little butterflies. I'm always really pleased to see them. Their food plant is sorrel, and I think maybe they use some of the docks as well, but it's mostly sorrel. So that's another good reason for letting some areas of your garden go wild. Okay, so now we're moving on to our fritillaries. These are the two large fritillaries that we have in Northern Ireland, and at a glance they don't look very easy to tell apart, and they're not. So we're getting into the area of specialist butterflies now, and we're getting into sort of the intermediate level of expertise. So this one on the left is the dark green fritillary, and this one is the silver wash fritillary. So you tell them apart really by the habitat, although the habitats can cross a little bit. The dark green fritillary is a summer butterfly. It likes dunes and coastal areas. It likes that kind of heat. It likes going up sort of like hot bracken hillsides like of the Mournes. So I would say that you probably get some good dark green fritillary sightings around the limestone areas of Fermanagh, where the food plant is present, of course. It's quite large. It's strikingly large, I think, when you see it for the first time, and it's got quite a powerful flight. Its food plant is violets, and it overwinters as a caterpillar. All the fritillaries overwinter as caterpillars. The silver washed is a summer butterfly as well. Now it's a butterfly of woodlands. It likes sunny glades, rides, and on woodland trails, that kind of environment. And it is it's the largest butterfly we have here, and it's very fast. So if you're walking through a woodland and something tears past you and it's orange and it's flying, it's probably a silver wash fritillary. It nectars on bramble, and its food plant are the woodland violets. Now, trying to tell them apart, if they've crossed environments, and which they do, you're better off trying to get a look at the underside of them. So the silver wash fritillary does have a silver washing on its underside, but it's a bit confusing because it also has quite a lot of dark green markings, and that's what we use to identify the dark green fritillary. So the dark green fritillary, you might look at it, it's from the top and think, what's green about it? It's actually its underwing. So you can see it's not very well depicted in here, but in the field, that is quite dark and with those white splodges, whereas the silver wash fritillary is silvery with green streaking. So it's just a matter of expertise, really, with that one, practice and expertise. So this is our special fritillary. You have plenty of these in Fermanagh. You probably know this one. I'll give you a second to rack your brain before I put up the name. The Marsh Fritillary. The Marsh Fritillary is much smaller than the other fritillaries. Whenever I see it each year, I'm always surprised at how small it is. It flies from mid-May to July, but you've got a good chance of seeing the caterpillars from August to October. So start looking out for caterpillar webs now, nestled down in the leaves of Devil's Bit scabious, feeding in a web. And they overwinter, and then they come out as soon as the weather starts getting warm enough for a nice bask in February to March, and they'll start feeding again. Their food plant is the Devil's Bit scabious, and they will only eat Devil's Bit scabious. I think they possibly might use meadow thistle, but Devil's Bit scabious is the main food plant, and we're losing the Devil's Bit scabious, so we're going to lose the Marsh Fritillary as a consequence. Now, you might look around the fields near you and think, well, I know where there's a field where there's loads of Devil's Bit scabious. Well, by all means, if you've got the permission, go and have a good look for Marsh Fritillary, because we'd love to hear about it. But what has quite often happened is the colonies of butterflies have become so separated from each other, it's not a very powerful flyer. It doesn't go very far. It likes to stay at home. So it can't fly off to another colony. And then you get decreased gene pools, and eventually a colony will die out. So part of the work that we do is try to increase the connectivity between these pockets of suitable habitat to try and increase the numbers of the butterfly. It's protected under the EU Habitats Directive. These are our heaths. There's 2 heath butterflies, one's small and one's large. I haven't seen a lot of large heath. I've seen them whizzing past. I haven't seen one close up, so I can't really give you any credible ID tips on seeing the large heath. But the small heath, you see it in a lot of places of good, grassland. It's a late spring to autumn butterfly. It is really quite small. You'll have seen it when you've gone for a walk through a long grassy field and they all emerge in front of you and sort of fly off a little bit in front of you, and tantalising, you get you to sort of go a bit further and they lead you a merry dance across a field. They're quite fluttery, they are small, but they're nice little they're nice little butterflies. And they're always good to see, and they come in, you always see them in good numbers. So it's not like the small copper where you see one or two. If you're seeing small heath, you're usually seeing quite a lot of them. And the large heath comes from late June to August. It's larger than the small heath, but it's not a particularly large butterfly. It likes lowland raised bogs. So it's a habitat specialist. It's pretty much the only butterfly that will use that environment. And because of the loss of lowland bogs due to drainage and harvesting of peat, we're really quite worried about this butterfly. So it's going to be an area of our concerted efforts over the next few years. I've only ever seen them whizzing past me and I never got a good chance at getting a good look at one. Okay, so here's a couple of species that are special to Fermanagh. So you might know these, seen as their local specialities. This one is just about blue. It doesn't look very blue there, and it is very, very small, and it's the small blue. And this little one on the right is quite dingy looking, and it's the dingy skipper. Now, the small blue flies for a short flight period between May and June. It is a very small butterfly, and it is confined to one colony in Fermanagh at Monowilken. And this site is strictly private, so please don't try to go and see it. We did think that it was extinct. We hadn't seen any records for several years, and then I think it was about 5 years ago, a colony was found during a survey. So that was really exciting. So it just shows sometimes you think something can be lost, but actually it's still there. Its food plant is kidney vetch, and it sits inside the flower and munches away at the anthers of the flower and all of the good stuff inside the flower, nicely protected by the petals. Clever little thing. And the dingy skipper is another Fermanagh speciality, and we don't get it anywhere else in Northern Ireland. It flies from May to early July. So you probably get the tail end of the dingy skipper flight period now. It's small, and it's got sort of a low darting flight. It's got quite a different habit to most other butterflies. I think it's quite mothy in its appearance and its habit. It sort of pings off it in a sort of a moth-like manner. And I think there's quite a few sites around Fermanagh in the verges as well. There's some good verge management going on where there's dingy skipper. Okay, so there's another couple of good species you have here, the purple hairstreak and the grayling. The purple hairstreak is coming up to its key flight period now, so this is really one for you to look out for currently. It's very difficult to see, so it's under recorded. So we don't have a very full idea of its populations and distribution. Its food plant is oak, and it flies in the canopy of oak trees. So anywhere you've got mature oak trees, it's worth having a look for purple hairstreak. And the best way to go and find them is to go out about 5 o'clock at night on a nice warm evening and take your binoculars and go and observe the top of the canopy of the oak tree, because they will be flying around the top of the canopy. So you'll only just get them as small specks in your binoculars, but you should be able to tell that the butterflies. They very rarely come down, and so that's why we have difficulty in recording them. But you can keep an eye out for fallen oak branches from autumn to spring. If there's been a storm and some oak branches have come down in your local area, because they overwinter as an egg. And the egg is located at the buds. I've got a picture I'll show you in a minute when I've gone through the grayling. So you can inspect fallen branches to see whether the egg is there, and then it'll let you know whether there's purple hairstreak. And just to let you know how difficult they are to find, at the head office in England of butterfly conservation, there was a very old oak tree, and all of the best butterfly boffins in the UK are located at this site pretty much. And I've been observing this oak tree trying to find purple hairstreak for several years and never found it. And then the tree was blown down and it had purple hairstreak eggs in it. They found it when it was blown down. So that just shows you how difficult it is to actually find this butterfly. The grayling is a summer to autumn butterfly. It's a really unique little butterfly. It lies flat against bare rock to camouflage itself. And it really does camouflage itself very well. I mean, I've seen them literally in front of my eyes disappear by laying themselves flat and then having to search the rock to find them again. They love rocky or coastal areas, but they'll also really enjoy the limestone areas of Fermanagh as well. So you should be able to get a sighting of the grayling, and their food plant are, you know, various grasses. The browns tend to live off various grasses. That's a purple hairstreak when it's sitting at rest, and some people do see them when they're freshly emerged, sitting like that before they fly up to the canopy. Some lucky people have had the occasional lucky shot and got them, and that is the egg there sitting in the bud terminal there, waiting all over winter to be turning into a caterpillar. These are some visitors that we very occasionally get. Not spending much time on those because of the time we have available to us. But this one is the comma. This one is the brimstone, and this one is clouded yellow. We did get a few comma sightings last year. I haven't had any comma sightings as far as I'm aware this year. Clouded yellow, we did have a handful of sightings of clouded yellow last year. And there's a very occasional sighting of a brimstone. There was once a brimstone colony around Lough Erne, but it died out several years ago. So there is the butterfly experts are always hopeful that we might have a return or a recovery of this species. Every year, we tend to get a few errors made with identification and people thinking that they've seen a brimstone or a clouded yellow. And it's actually a small white or large white, freshly emerged second brood underside. When they're sitting at rest, they can be very yellow. So if you're seeing something that's very yellow and you get all excited, just double check that it's not a small white or a large white. And this is not a species that you would find in Fermanagh anyway. And it's a species which we're very worried about. And this is the final one. This is wall. And it was confined to a very small stretch of coast along County Down. And it was, I think one adult was seen in 2019, very few records before that for a few years. And since there's been very few records. And we're worried about it. So we fear for this one that it might have gone, but we're keeping our fingers crossed like the small blue that it might pop up again. Okay, folks, that's the end of the ID session. I'm going to give you a chance maybe to pop a couple of questions in the chat, and I'll just turn off my video and mute my.
That's super, Rachel. Thank you very much. I'm sure many of us have learned quite a lot about various butterflies that we have here in Fermanagh. We seem to be very lucky to have quite a selection of some rare butterflies as well, Rachel. Thank you very much. Maybe I'll start the questions, Rachel. If anybody wants to actually put in any questions regarding what Rachel has spoke about, if you just want to type it into the chat box, or if there's anybody who can't operate the chat box, please just unmute your microphone and Rachel will be able to answer your question then. But Rachel, just my question would be on the last butterfly, the wall. It is quite rare at the moment. Where exactly would specific places could you look for that? Like, is it a particular area that we need to look in to find it, or?
No, I mean, for many years now, it has only been found on this small area of County Down coast. So it's not a butterfly that you would see or we would know of in Fermanagh. for many years, but I just wanted to pop it in there because I wanted to complete the full Northern Ireland set. But I feel like I'm missing a slide, which I don't know why it's popped out of there, but I actually had a final slide there which told you where you could go to see some of these things. It's a shame that's not in, but I'll just tell you myself now. So the purple hairstreak, you can go to Crom and Florence Court. Now there's a woodland by Florence Court as well, and they're both very good sites to go and see the purple hairstreak.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and Killykeegan is obviously an excellent site for seeing many of your species. So the dingy skipper's just coming to the end now, but you know, that's a good place to head to for large heath, for example. You'll see there. And also the silver wash fritillary are coming into their own now as well, Heather. So again, head down to Crom and Florence Court to see the silver wash fritillary. So those would be my two, you know, top tips for the coming weeks to look out for. And people can take the binoculars with them and try and find us some purple hairstreaks. We'd be really grateful because we're very low on purple hairstreak records.
That's great, Rachel. At least we know to head down to our local parks and we can have a good look maybe over the next few weeks. Celine has asked a question, Rachel. Do they overwinter on their host plants?
No, not always. They can go off and you know, make their chrysalis somewhere else that's safer. Obviously, if their host plant is you know, an annual, it's going to die away. So then the chrysalis would be vulnerable. So a lot of them, you know, once they've finished their feeding stage, they'll crawl off and then they'll go and find somewhere more suitable to hang out for the winter so they can be safe.
Perfect. Michelle Gildernew has actually said as well that she was up on the north coast at the end of July 2019 and seen a great number of sorry, it's just moved on me there. She's seen a great number of painted ladies at Carrick-a-Reid Rope Bridge. Yes,
was that 2019? Did you say? Yeah, there was thousands of them. There was that the recording levels went through the roof 2019 because lots of people were seeing these massive butterflies in great numbers for the first time and getting incredibly excited about it and sending in records, which was brilliant. So I've had this huge leap in recording for 2019, which was thanks to the painted ladies. So yeah, there was great numbers. I was actually in Northumberland for a summer holiday in 2019, and we were in the sea and there was clouds of painted ladies were coming past us, the ocean, coming from the ocean towards us, you know, so they can have clouds of them coming. It's really incredible.
Brilliant. Robin has asked, Rachel, can you give some tips about the difference between butterflies and moths?
Yeah. Okay, so basically they are the same creature, really. They're all part of the Lepidoptera family. But to be able to tell the difference between what we know as a moth and what we know as a butterfly, which is mostly cultural rather than scientific, butterflies do tend to rest with their wings together, and moths do tend to sort of, oh, hang on, where's my camera? Rest with their wings in like a jet style, you know, crossed over like this. Moths tend to fly at night and butterflies fly in the day, but we have day flying moths as well, so these are not particularly helpful tips. Moths have feathery antennae, okay, and butterflies have clubbed antennae. That is quite a good diagnostic. There are some moths that look like they've got clubbed antennae, but they're just very tightly feathered at the end because they're pretending to be something else, like a hornet or a bee, you know, so there is some variations there, but the antenna is really the best one to go for. But there are, you know, there's obviously differences in a few differences in both moths and butterflies. For example, like early thorns will sit with the wings together, and then the dingy skipper at night, it rests like a moth. So it's difficult to say, and it's sort of a basic ID tip difference, really.
Super, that's great, Rachel. Also, Celine has also asked us a great question here. How do you go about counting and recording, and how many butterflies are there in our local region?
How many are there in Fermanagh? Okay, so you have most of the butterflies. Fermanagh is an absolutely excellent area. You've got such incredible habitats and you've got a great mosaic of habitats. So you've got really brilliant butterflies in Fermanagh. We would love you to put in your records. I do have some ideas for you at the end of the next presentation, but just to say that one of the easiest ways to do it is to put the iRecord Butterfly app on your phone. And if you don't have a smartphone, then there's an iRecord app on online. And if you don't have any kind of technology, you can still just pop your records into a spreadsheet and send them into us, and we'll make sure that they get used.
Brilliant, that's great. And it is so important that we, if we do see these butterflies, that we start to record them and so we're able to understand what's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, butterfly conservation really genuinely use all of this citizen science and volunteer captured records in order to write groundbreaking and world leading research. So it is, you know, we're the leading organisation in Europe for butterflies. It is used in order to inform the government about policy. Whether they listen to us or not is a different matter, but it is used to inform, and it's used to drive change in the way we go about, you know, our business as societies. So it is very important. Every record counts. It is not being gathered by scientists. This is all volunteer effort. Yeah.
Very lucky to have some fantastic volunteers out there as well from
Yes.
Contribution. Brian has also asked, he's been rewilding his garden and has lots of larval foods listed, but the number of butterflies this year has been quite disappointing as a range of species. Do we need the cuckoo flower standing as a larval plant for the orange tip after the flowers have died back?
Yes, because the caterpillar eats the seeds. So yeah, keep your cuckoo flower until it's basically withered away would be my advice. We see some absolute tragic examples of there being swathes of cuckoo flower which have been left because someone has campaigned in order to keep a verge protected in order, you know, for the cuckoo flower, and then as soon as they start going over, they'll come along and mow it, and it's just soul destroying because you know that all of the caterpillars are just being mown to blitz, you know? So it's really important to keep the cuckoo flowers, until they wither away. Really good question. My next presentation, Brian, is all about what you can do in your gardens and what you can do in your community spaces as well. So hopefully we'll get some good tips from that.
Super, that's great. And Evelyn has just said she's seen a painted lady down at Lough Erne and Lisnaskea a few weeks ago, so that's great.
Good, get it on, get a record in.
Yeah. The next session we'll be able to know all about how to put in your records, Evelyn. And Robin from LELP has actually written all the different species that Rachael has talked about this evening is there in the chat box for anybody that wants to maybe take a note or a wee screenshot. And we can also send that out tomorrow to everybody as well, if anybody needs anything. So that's great. That seems to be the questions for now. Mary, if nobody else has any more, sorry, Rachael, sorry, I was looking at a
no, you're okay. Don't worry, I've been told worse. So if anybody has any more questions, or if not, we'll just go on to the next session. And again, if anybody has questions during this, please just give us a wee message in the chat box and we'll be able to answer that for you. Okay, everybody, that's me up and running. Everyone's seeing that all right? Yeah, good. Okay, so as we were just discussing there, all of this, we gather lots of data on butterflies, and it is used in order to, you know, do a lot of research. And in the State of the UK Butterflies 2015 report, we found that 3/4 of UK species had declined in range or abundance. And what that means is their numbers are down and the places where they're living are down for 3/4 of our species. And that's happened over the past 30 years. So we're in a bad place, you know, with our butterflies and our invertebrates. And it's not looking good. And we need to do absolutely everything that we can to help them. Some species are doing okay because they are responding to what we believe is climate change. So for example, here, I'll just point out this map to you. The orange tip, the burgundy dots is the data from 1970 to 1982. And the orange dots are data from 2010 to 2014. So you can see that in those 30 years, this butterfly's northerly range was here, and now it's right up here across the west as well. So something really major is going on there to allow that butterfly to increase its range in just 30 years so phenomenally. These are this data, all these dots were collected by volunteers, so you can see what an important picture it is providing for us of our butterflies. So why are butterflies declining? You probably know all this already, but we'll whiz through it. Agricultural intensification, use of pesticides, woodland management, forestry and lack of coppicing of deciduous woods, climate change, habitat loss. So our bogs, our meadows, our hedgerows and our woodland are all being lost at an alarming rate, at a rate that we're probably not able to recover from unless we get our act together pretty quickly. And why should we bother doing it? Some people would say, well, why bother? It's only a butterfly. What's the point? Well, they have an intrinsic value, their own right, to be on this earth as a creature. They give us amazing enjoyment. That's actually a moth. That's an elephant hawk moth. Beautiful, stunning creature. They are absolutely essential for the ecosystem. So invertebrates of all types are, you know, the first step after plants on the food chain. So if you lose your invertebrates, everything else is going to really suffer. They are amazing for our health and well-being. I'm assuming all of you who are here love to get out into the country and have a walk and see wildlife and appreciate the beauty of nature, and always feel a lot better when you've had the chance to do so. And through lockdown, we all discovered just how important that was for keeping us all well and keeping us all well balanced as well. And they're essential for the pollination of wildflowers. So they're really important in the ecosystem, and they're really important to us as humans. The good news is that gardens can be really fabulous for butterflies. They provide very good corridors or stepping stones to help wildlife move. So I was explaining to you the issue with the devil's foot scabious and colonies of Marsh Fritillary being cut off from each other. If we provide these corridors and stepping stones, then we're able to provide what we call connectivity between habitats, and that allows species to move, to increase their gene pool, and it increases their resilience and just makes them less vulnerable to the pressures of the world. Some gardens, actually many gardens, can be much more diverse than you know, an acre of agricultural field and a very tightly cut hedgerow. So they really have their part to play, and they can be essential resources for shelter and foraging. Okay, so have a look at these plants and see if you recognise these plants. And if you use any of these plants, please don't use them anymore, because these plants are what we call plastic plants, and they have been bred to within an inch of their lives to be very blousy, to have huge petals, huge blooms, be very colourful, but the loss of pollen and nectar. So they are no use at all to butterflies, and they're no use to their caterpillars either. So we've sort of got our eye trained into these big blousy blooms, and I think we need a bit of a change of perception. We need a change in fashion in gardening, and we need to have a bit of perception change here and start going back to a more natural, subtle palette. So let's get rid of the petunias and the begonias and start moving towards something which is a bit more useful, because we have to use every scrap of habitat we can get our hands on. If we're going to save butterflies and we're going to help invertebrates, we really need to use it all, anything that's spare. So for your gardens, I'll give you my best plants. This is Ellie Campaign. There's a list coming up that we're going to share, so jot down by all means, but there is a list coming up. This is Ellie Campaign. It was a plant actually which was used as a medicinal plant to treat lameness in horses. And you sometimes would find it as in the wild, along beaches and stuff like that, along the margins of beaches. And in the summer, I don't have one in my present home, I've just moved, but in my previous home, in the summer, there would be at least 5 pollinators using every single one of those flower heads. It was a fabulous plant. And it self-seeds really well, and you can dig it up, and it's really robust, and you can spread it around and give it to your friends. So I really encourage you to use this one. And this one bottom right is sedum. You probably recognize this. It's got like a sort of a succulent style leaf, and it's oh, I've lost my track. What was I going to say about that? No, anyway, it doesn't matter. It flowers in autumn, and it's a great late nectar source. It's really important nectar source later on when everything else is running out. And last year we had a really good small tortoiseshell autumn, and I drove into my drive where I have loads of sedums, and clouds of butterflies came up. There was speckled woods, there was small tortoiseshells, there was red admirals, there was peacocks. It was phenomenal. I've never seen so many butterflies in my life, honestly, in my entire life in a garden. I went to the neighbours and called the neighbours in and said, look at this, this is amazing. We had a really good year. So fill your garden with sedum and you will get butterflies. This is hemp agrimony. This again is a wild plant, excuse me, but it makes a really good garden plant as well because it's got great big architectural leaves and it's got a nice flower head, big flower head. We've got perennial wallflower. Butterflies absolutely love this, and this self-seeds really nicely. And field scabious. So these are all really excellent plants. And what you notice about these plants are they've got quite flat heads. So they're the good landing pads. So butterflies can get onto them easily. If you've got anything with lots of tubes and things like that, they're probably really good for bees, but the butterflies need these nice flat landing pads to make use of these nectar-rich resources. This is a comment on marjoram. That's the wild marjoram, but many people have it in the plant as in their garden as a herb, and it splits really well, and get a bit from someone because it will be heaving with pollinators. It is a superb plant. I have it everywhere in my garden. Here, top left, excuse me, we've got Verbena boniorensis. That's a really tall plant, grassland plant. It's sometimes difficult to overwinter here, but you can stick it in pots. It's beautiful. Self-seeds really nicely. Butterflies absolutely love it. We've got chives. They grow like mad. You can spread those, split them and spread them. Butterflies like those. That's Centura or perennial knapweed. Here we've got an artichoke. I don't know if anyone's a veg grower and you've grown artichoke. I mean, it's not really worth the bother for feasting purposes because you get a tiny, tiny piece of artichoke out in the middle of it. But butterflies love it. So grow it for butterflies. You'll get several butterflies feeding on that. Up there, I've got red valerian. It's probably a plant you get a lot of just growing by the wayside in Fermanagh. It's self-seeds really nicely. It's very pretty and butterflies love that too. And the last one there, honesty. Honesty is that plant that gives that dried seed head with a very sort of pearlescent circular seed head that everybody had in a dried flower display in the 70s. I don't know if you remember those, but they self-seed really nicely in the garden. They flower very early in spring, so they're a really brilliant plant to get going in your border because they'll provide excellent early spring nectar and they'll self-seed, and you can put the dry bits in your vase. Really nice. Okay, so that's the list there. I think Robin is going to attempt to do a screen print and share it, but I'll just take a drink of water if you want to make a couple of, you could screen print it yourselves if you know how to do it, obviously.
We will also send everybody out an email with these
Sure.
on it as well, just whenever after we get the recording through.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. And actually, I would like to forward you, because obviously it's difficult to share links on a webinar that are useful to people. So I'll share lots of links for recording and links to resources for wildlife gardening and things like that as well.
And this will be available on our website as well, the recording, for anybody that needs to maybe look back on things. So,
okay. So we've got to remember the caterpillars. That's the take-home message. Don't forget the caterpillars in gardens. So nettles, small tortoiseshell, red admiral and peacock all feed on the nettle. Please do not let it be a dirty secret behind the back of the shed. We want it out in the sun, have it at the back of the border where no one's going to get stung and in a nice sunny spot, and then you'll get butterflies laying their eggs on them. But if you stick it somewhere out of the way where it's dark, they'll not bother. Cabbage family. So honesty, that plant that I just showed you, the lovely purple one, that's a member of the cabbage family. So you can, it is used sometimes as a food plant for caterpillars as well. So it's a win-win, that plant. And sweet rocket, nasturtiums, and all of your veg plants as well, you can put into the garden. So even if you're not a veg grower, you can just go and buy a packet of cheap cabbage seeds and chuck them into a pot and grow them on, and you'll have, you know, butterflies using them. And, you know, they tend to be cheap as well. You can get some cheap varieties, which will be excellent. Thistle for the painted ladies. Again, at the back of the border, nice sunny spot, amazing nectar source as well. Cuckoo flower and garlic mustard for the orange tips. Hedgerows, trees and shrubs, really important. Masses of nectar and pollen source. Okay, so if you think about how much nectar you get in a hawthorn, you see the hawthorns this year, they were absolutely amazing, weren't they? They were just heaving with flowers. So if you can find a place for a tree like a hawthorn, filled with nectar and pollen, an apple tree, loads of flowers on that amazing nectar and pollen resource. Many deciduous trees, our native trees, are caterpillar food plant of lots of moths, so you're attracting moths there as well. And they're nesting and sheltering site for bumblebees and for butterflies and lots of invertebrates. So get trees into your garden. You can grow a tree in a pot and keep it small. You don't have to have a huge tree. And I also encourage you to just be a bit easier on your hedges. Don't keep cutting them all summer. What's the point in that? You know, give yourself a summer off, cut them before the bird nesting season, then leave them until the end of autumn. And then what you've got is you've got your pollen and your nectar source for your invertebrates and your pollinators. And then you've got your food for your birds. So if you've got hawthorn or you've got crabapple or, you know, any of the seed giving trees, you're providing for birds as well. So trees, you know, get the trees in your garden and leave your hedges alone. Shelter. So this is a little bit like the question that we had earlier about the cuckoo flower. So many butterfly and moth species overwinter as caterpillars or chrysalis pupa eggs. So they're around your garden, even if you can't see them, and they have, you know, they've evolved to camouflage themselves. So when you are cutting down the stems of your garden, this is a stem that my colleague was cutting out of his garden, and he didn't even see that chrysalis. He didn't see it until he'd cut it down. So what he did is he just went and stacked those stems somewhere sheltered under a bush, or you can put those around the back of the shed. You're allowed to do that. Stack your stems somewhere, don't burn them. Don't burn stuff from the garden because you're burning all kinds of life cycle stages going on there. Take a bit of a relaxed approach. Just, you know, enjoy life. Go out and have a nice walk. Leave the mower and the trimmer in the garage. Leave some sections of your hedges unpruned and don't burn stuff. I said that already. My favourite thing to do if you're starting out a wildlife garden, cut some willow. Willow is absolutely fabulous. Cut a pencil size thickness of a stem, cut it into bits and stick it in a pot. Make sure you get it the right way up. You will have plants the next year, and they, you know, I've had cuttings that have provided catkins the very next year. You can keep them in pots or you can plant them out as trees in the garden. And willow supports, you know, about 270 species of invertebrate. No, it's not. It's actually higher than that. Pretty sure it's higher than that. If you include in the mites, I think it's nearly 400 species. And bees use it, butterflies use it, loads of caterpillars of moths use use it as a food plant. And it's also really early spring flowering plant, so it's brilliant as a nectar resource in spring. Please don't use compost with peat in. And I know everyone goes, oh, you can't get compost that works without peat in it. Well, we're going to have to get over that because it is an environmental disaster, the way that we use peat. It's got to come to an end. Not only are we depriving specialist animals of their habitat, this is the emperor moth and this is the large heath, but we are also, you know, by our use through gardens, churning out absolutely masses of carbon into the atmosphere. So harvesting peat is like burning the Amazon. There's more carbon in peat than our peat bogs in the world than there is in the entire combination of the world's forests. So we really have to stop using peat. I know there is a directive now and there's a target for when peat will be ceased to be used, but let's drive the market by not buying peat compost. And we can demand as consumers that we get better quality non-peat compost. And there are alternatives coming on the market that aren't half bad now. I'm using them myself to grow tomatoes. Okay, so why don't you start experimenting with some wildflowers in the lawn? You don't have to be a long lawn person. You can still have a short lawn. But if you cut your lawn and remove the cuttings rather than mulching them, you're going to reduce the fertility. And when you reduce the fertility in your lawn, you get wildflowers coming in. And my neighbour in my old house mowed his lawn every single week. And he had this huge swathe of these beautiful orange fox and cubs and all of these little hawk bits. And there's me growing my long meadow trying to get a flower in it and can't get a single flower in it. I was going, what's going on here? And then this was a few years ago, and a wise friend said, do what he does. And it was absolutely true. I mowed my lawn like mad for 6 weeks, took away all of the fertility, and then I started getting interesting plants in it. Your grass sward will stay short, but if you give it about 6 weeks instead of doing it every couple of weeks, you get beautiful short swathes of self-heal and fox and clubs, and they're all swaying in the wind, and they pop up after every mowing. They're absolutely incredible and they look stunning. So try and start encouraging some more wildflowers. They're not called weeds, they're called wildflowers. Get them into the garden. So meadows, you've got gorgeous meadows in Fermanagh, so I don't need to talk to you about meadows. But why can't we start extending this to more of our amenity areas, more of our public spaces, and provide even more places for wildlife? I know there's quite a bit of this going on, and I know this is quite enjoyed by quite a lot of people, this cornfield annual meadow. And it has its place, and it's better if it's replacing nothing. But we're not a great fan of it because it's a little bit problematic. Some of it's not native, so that means caterpillars can't use it. If we're bringing in plants from maybe other countries in Europe, they might just have a slightly different mix, slightly different gene setup, and they might start hybridizing with our plants and making them infertile. You know, the way that's happened with the Spanish bluebell, and it's hybridizing with our native bluebell and making them infertile. And then they start, you know, coming out at different times of the year, and they start getting out of sync with the invertebrates that want to use them. So we would like to try and avoid these mixes if we can, but I do accept that they have their place. So as an alternative, go with a native meadow. And this is where I was talking about that issue of perception before, about what's beautiful. With fashion, we've come to think that everything has to be really red and, you know, and beautiful and all blousy and all singing and all dancing. If we look at the subtleties of a wildflower meadow, the beauty within it, you have to look up close at the flowers. You have to get in close, not going to jump out at you. So a self-heal, for example, is so beautifully constructed. It has the most gorgeous palette of colours. We need to start thinking about what a meadow is. A meadow is a native thing like this, and it's not a cornfield ornamental display like this. Lecture over. Okay, this is my friend Inga, and butterfly conservation volunteer, and she's a really keen gardener. So what she's done is she's introduced the concept of the meadow into her garden, but she's used it in a landscaped way. So she has these nicely maintained paths through it, and she just stopped mowing the grass, did that regime that I advised, where you cut it, you lift it, and you remove it, and she started getting loads of really fabulous flowers in her garden. Now I think it's about 3 or 4 years down the road now, but these are orchids. She has hundreds of orchids coming through her lawn. You know, that's fabulous, isn't it? I mean, who wouldn't enjoy that? And it's much nicer than the cornfield annual mix. And it's really useful for our native invertebrates. Dandelions. Dandelions are the best food resource in spring for all pollinators. It is criminal to cut down a dandelion. You must find some space for dandelions, and anywhere where you see councils with large dandelion verges, ring them up and say, fabulous, well done for that dandelion verge. You're doing a great job for pollinators. At the start of spring, there is very little food resource available, and dandelions are a lifeline. They're literally a case of life or death for lots of insects. So please, if you are a person who likes a lawn, just hold off your mowing until the dandelions have gone over, and you will be doing a great thing for wildlife. It's nearly my one take-home message from the whole of this session, is let the dandelions grow in spring. More dandelions, wild bees. Every single dandelion I look at in spring has a bee inside it. You try that out next year. Just have a walk, go along a dandelion-rich verge, and there's a bee in every single one of them foraging. And they're staying there for hours because there's so much nectar in them. So outside of your own gardens, what can you do to help? This is where I'm really interested, and I like doing little projects with communities. We don't need to be mowing grass. It's pointless. It's a waste of fossil fuel. It's a waste of council funds. You know, we need to maintain safe sight lines. That needs to be done. But mowing grass for the sake of having a mown lawn with dead clippings on it is totally pointless. So we need to get over that. And again, that perception thing, start seeing what we can do with our local spaces, with our community areas. So don't mow projects are fabulous. This is an example of a really good verge up the Causeway coast. These things do not need to be sprayed, and they do not need to be mowed. The spraying that goes on absolutely breaks my heart. This is a verge which is close to a woodland near me. It is beautiful. It's got wood anemone in it, it's got celandine in it, it's got bluebells in it. There are people on this road who mow that out in front of their house. You know, I just, again, it's that perception thing. We need to move away from this, the front of your house having to be socially acceptable, neat, tidy looking verge. Let's have it become socially acceptable that you create for wildlife in front of your house. This gorgeous picture was taken during lockdown, and the housing executive didn't get out to mow an area of ground in Kilray, up near me. And this mum and daughter were out there enjoying it every single day during lockdown. And she took these really amazing photographs of it. This is cuckoo flower, swathes and swathes of cuckoo flower. And there was quite a lot of campaigning done to save it. And we just rang up the housing executive and said, look, the locals like it as it is, don't mow it. And, you know, they agreed. But there was some other examples where this was going on during lockdown because the mowers hadn't been out, because the guys weren't allowed to go out. And then as soon as they were allowed out, there was fields and fields of cuckoo flower like this. Antrim Hospital was one of them. It all got cut. And I think it's just a case of being aware of these things and being prepared to maybe ring up someone who's in charge and say, let's not bother cutting this. Let's see if we can do something different with it. And I've got lots of examples of people who have done that in their own communities. And I've just asked the questions and said, me and a couple of friends will manage it. We'll do the mowing. We'll do this. You can help us out with that. And they've made really great progress. There's an awful lot you can do in your local community. This is Portland. This is my local community. So I've done a bit of work here formally as butterfly conservation, but I'm also just a resident who works here. And this is our local park. And we got in touch with the council and we said, we want to take over several verges in the park and we want to manage them for wildlife. And we've got a team of volunteers. Can we do it? And they said, yeah, of course you can. That's really wonderful. Thank you very much. Ticks their green infrastructure targets and their biodiversity targets. They've actually helped us out with some planting of a flower turf, and they come and mow it when we ask them to. We have had to put up signs in order for them not to mow it at the inappropriate time and to inform the public. And we do nice, neat, wavy paths through it and nice edges on it so people know what's going on. And we go and work on it at times when there's lots of people kicking about, like after school when all the mums are out with the kids at the park. So people say, oh, what's going on here? And we say, oh, we're managing it for wildlife. So we just ask questions and people said, yes, you can do it. And actually this community group have availed of at least 2 community grants of a couple of £1,000s through this project. So they said, we're a group. We manage local spaces for wildlife. They made one COVID recovery programme where they got new people to come down and work it for 6 weeks and got some money for it. So there's loads of little grants you can tap into and, you know, approach your local council, approach your local community group and see if you can, you know, make some difference in your local areas. Causeway Hospital, another example of amazing work that's gone on there. They had huge grounds, which was all mown. My friend Donna is a nurse there. And she also was the, you know, sort of the lead along with a biodiversity officer on the Don't Mow project in Causeway, Coast and Glens. And she just liaised with the council estate manager and said, let's start managing this as a meadow. And he said, okay, what do we do? And she said, it'll save you money, you won't have to mow it as much, etc., etc. And they've got amazing meadows down there. People go down there for a walk. They've got rare plants, they've got marsh helleborines. They put up some interpretation to inform people what's going on. And again, cut some wavy paths, cut nice edges on it to make it look like it's landscaped. And then people's perception change. Oh yeah, this is meant to happen. They're meant to be doing this. They've just not got round to doing their mowing. You know, this is intentional. This was my career defining moment. So I was working on a project with schools where I was doing something similar, which was encouraging them to, you know, create habitat for wildlife inside their school grounds. And I was obviously supporting a lot of Don't Mow projects because it's free. It actually saves you money. You stop mowing, and you don't have to, you know, you don't have to spend any money on pots and plants and seeds. Just see what comes up. Now, in the second year, the first year, the meadow was absolutely spectacular with the late spring plants. It was really wonderful, and there was over 30 species in it. And the second year, I took my friend Donna down because she's really good at botany, and she just started squealing. And I didn't know what she was squealing at because I'd never seen them before, because they're rare. And 60 Irish ladies' tresses orchids had turned up in this school meadow. Now, this meadow had been mown for about 50 years, and they'd just been sitting in there waiting for their chance to pop up. And there were 60 of them. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Irish ladies' tresses, but Northern Ireland has the biggest population in the whole of Europe. Ireland has the whole of the island of Ireland has a stronghold. I think there's a tiny population in Devon or somewhere, and there's literally about 4 plants, and something similar in Scotland. And Northern Ireland has about 10 sites with Irish ladies' tresses of about between 5 and 10 plants. This was 60 turned up in a school just because we stopped mowing the grass. You know, what a brilliant case study that is for going to your council, going to your school, going to your church. So much church ground is mown. You know, that would be a great place to start. So inspirational stories here to get you going on your quest for more habitats. And that was in Ballymena, that school. And this is one of their neighbours. This is St. Louis in Ballymena. And they approached me this year, really keen groundsman. And he said, I'd like to do a meadows project. Would you pop down? And I went and had a look at the grounds, really brilliant grounds. I'm so excited to go back in July and see what's coming up there, because some of it was really nice wet meadow. I went down in May, and he sent me these last week. They've already got orchids already coming up in that school. And it's just one keen guy. He's now got the biology department engaged. They're really thrilled, and they're setting up an environment group amongst the students, the first one that they've ever had. So, you know, you can really get the ball rolling just by one keen person asking questions and going to a couple of people to ask for permission. So if you're inspired by these actions and you want to do a bit yourself, head to Don't Mow, Let It Grow. They've got some fantastic resources, but their Facebook page is absolutely filled with incredible photographs of real life Northern Ireland public space, which has been managed for wildlife. So if you need to get a little portfolio together so you can influence other people, that's your place to go. And also the All Island Pollinator Plan is my go-to resource always. It's absolutely brilliant. It's got guidelines for nearly every scenario you can imagine, whether you're a church, whether you're a golf club, whether you're a farmer, whether you're a school. You know, there's something for everyone there. They've made something for everyone to be able to take actions for pollinators. And you can add your actions here. They've got a little bit where you can say what you're doing, so we can create a map. You can do little surveys with the flower insect times counts, and you can pledge your garden as well to say that you're doing something for pollinators. But the All Island Pollinator Plan is heaving with advice, and that's the place to go if you want to get some kind of maybe project models or ideas for how you might make a start. So if you want to go and do some recording as well to see what's in your grounds, this is a beginner's entry sort of recording scheme. The Big Butterfly Count is coming out at the end of July. There's an app you can download onto your phone, or you can use this ID sheet. There's the I Record Butterflies app you can put onto your phone, or again, you can look that up and make an account online via your PC or laptop. And there's the Garden Butterfly Survey. And again, this is an online entry survey that you can join in to record the butterflies that come into your garden every week. So those would be entry level recording activities, but you can go right up to the top where you're doing a weekly walk of a transect in a specialist habitat and counting the butterflies that you see there every week. So if you're interested in any recording, it would be lovely to have you on board. There's lots of training events throughout the year, obviously been a bit halted by COVID this year, but we hope to roll out some more face-to-face events in the future. And I will send a link to Heather to circulate with all of the opportunities that you can avail of. And that's me done. I think you can probably tell I'm very passionate about creation of habitat. I've taught myself to death. I hope you're all still hanging on in there, but thanks very much for listening. Much appreciated.